The last person to see her alive said nothing seemed unusual. That's what made the case so disturbing. Because within 24 hours, a woman who lived a quiet, carefully organized life had vanished without a trace. No struggle. No goodbye. No evidence that she had planned to disappear. Just a single detail investigators still can't explain. Her phone was still recording. The case began in the quiet English town of a place known more for sea air and fishing boats than criminal investigations. The streets were narrow, the houses centuries old, and the community small enough that most residents knew each other by name. Which is why the disappearance of 29-year-old Charlotte Bennett shook the town so deeply. Charlotte was the kind of person people trusted. She worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing agency based in, commuting a few days a week but mostly working remotely from her cottage near the harbor. Friends described her as calm, intelligent, and thoughtful. She loved early morning walks along the cliffs. She collected old books. And she kept her life carefully structured. But over the previous year, something had changed. And that change had a name. Daniel Hartley. Daniel was 34, tall, well-spoken, and easy to like. He had moved to Whitby just 18 months earlier after accepting a management position at a marine logistics company operating along the North Sea. Unlike Charlotte, Daniel wasn't originally from the area. He grew up in and had spent years working in different cities before deciding he wanted a quieter life. That's how their paths crossed. On a rainy October evening inside a small cafe near the harbor. Charlotte had been working on her laptop by the window. Daniel had ordered tea and sat at the table beside her. At first, it was just a polite conversation about the weather. But within an hour they were still talking. Two strangers discovering unexpected similarities. They both loved coastal towns. They both enjoyed photography. And they both preferred quiet nights over crowded pubs. Over the next few months, their relationship grew naturally. Walks along the cliffs, weekend drives to nearby villages, dinners at small seaside restaurants. To everyone who knew them, they seemed happy. But investigators later discovered something important. The first warning signs had appeared long before Charlotte disappeared. And almost no one noticed them. At first it was small things. Charlotte began canceling plans with friends more often. She stopped attending her weekly book club. She declined invitations she would normally accept. When her best friend Amelia asked about it, Charlotte laughed it off. She said work had simply been overwhelming. But Amelia wasn't convinced. Charlotte had always handled stress well. Something about her tone sounded different. More cautious. As if she were choosing her words carefully. Then there were the neighbors. Charlotte's cottage sat on a quiet lane overlooking the harbor. An elderly couple living next door later told investigators they occasionally heard arguments late at night. Nothing violent, but intense. Voices raised. Doors closing harder than usual. Once, just after midnight, the woman claimed she heard Charlotte say something that stuck with her. "Daniel, this isn't what we agreed." At the time, the neighbor assumed it was just a relationship disagreement. But months later, those words would become part of the investigation. And then there was the message. 3 weeks before Charlotte disappeared, she sent Amelia a text late at night. It was only one sentence. "Do you ever feel like someone knows more about your life than they should?" Amelia asked what she meant. Charlotte never answered. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. But investigators later confirmed something strange. Charlotte had deleted the entire conversation thread. Which wasn't like her. She rarely deleted messages. That small digital decision would later become one of the earliest clues in the case. But at the time, no one realized its significance. Life continued normally. Until the night everything changed. It was a Tuesday evening in early March. Cold wind coming in from the North Sea. Charlotte had finished work around 6. According to her laptop activity logs, she sent a final design file to her employer and logged off at 6:17 p.m. At 7:03 p.m., she made a phone call. The call lasted 8 minutes. The person on the other end was Daniel. Investigators later obtained the call record, but the contents of the conversation were never recovered. After the call ended, Charlotte left her cottage. A nearby security camera captured her walking toward the harbor path. She was wearing a long gray coat, her hair tied back. Nothing unusual, nothing suggesting the last confirmed sighting of her life. But someone else appeared in the footage just seconds later. Daniel, walking in the same direction. At the time, investigators didn't know whether they had arranged to meet, or whether he had followed her. And that single question would haunt the investigation, because what happened next remains unclear. At 7:28 p.m., Charlotte's phone registered movement near the cliffside walking trail. At 7:31 p.m., it stopped moving. At 7:34 p.m., something else happened. The phone microphone activated, for exactly 36 seconds. Investigators still debate what triggered the recording. Some believe it was accidental. Others suspect Charlotte may have activated it deliberately. The audio was distorted by wind, but several sounds could be heard clearly. Footsteps, a male voice, and Charlotte speaking 3 words investigators would replay hundreds of times. "You promised me." Then the recording ended. The phone remained where it fell. Charlotte did not. When she failed to answer calls the next morning, Amelia grew concerned. By evening, Charlotte still hadn't returned home. Her car was parked outside her cottage. Her laptop sat open on the desk. Her wallet remained in the kitchen. Nothing suggested she had planned to travel. Amelia reported her missing. Local police launched a search. Initially, officers believed it might be a simple missing persons case. Perhaps Charlotte had gone for a walk and suffered an accident along the cliffs. But the discovery of her phone changed everything. It was found the following afternoon near the coastal path overlooking the sea. The screen was cracked, but it was still functional. Inside the device was the 36-second recording, and the final location data placing Charlotte at the cliffs. But there was no sign of her. No footprints leading toward the edge. No clothing. No personal items. Just the phone. And the voice recording. Police immediately began interviewing Daniel. At first, his story seemed straightforward. He confirmed they had spoken that evening. But he claimed their conversation was ordinary. He said Charlotte mentioned going for a walk. He denied meeting her that night. When investigators showed him the security footage of him walking behind her, his explanation shifted slightly. He admitted he had also gone for a walk, but insisted it was coincidence. He claimed he turned back after a few minutes. There were no witnesses who could confirm or deny his account. And there was another problem. Daniel's phone had been switched off between 7:20 p.m. and 9:10 p.m. A 2-hour window during which Charlotte vanished. He said the battery had died. Investigators couldn't prove otherwise. But something about the timing made detectives uneasy. Still, suspicion alone wasn't enough. Without evidence, the investigation stalled. Until another discovery forced detectives to look deeper into Daniel's past. 2 weeks after Charlotte disappeared, a digital forensic specialist examining her laptop uncovered something unusual. Charlotte had been researching a specific topic, repeatedly, late at night, for several weeks. The searches all involved one subject: unreported disappearances in coastal towns. And one name appeared more than once: Daniel Hartley. But not in connection with Whitby. The search results pointed to a completely different location. 3 years earlier, in a town hundreds of miles away. A place called. And when investigators contacted police there, they learned something that changed the entire investigation. Because Daniel Hartley had once been questioned in another missing persons case. A woman who vanished near the coast. A woman investigators never found. And the final person who saw her alive had also been Daniel. The moment detectives confirmed the connection, the quiet disappearance in Whitby became something much darker. 2 missing women. 2 coastal towns. 1 man standing between them. But what investigators discovered next would make the case even more disturbing. Because Charlotte hadn't just been researching Daniel's past. She had been planning to confront him about it. And the night she disappeared may have been the night she finally did. But what detectives later found inside Daniel's house would raise a chilling possibility. Charlotte might have uncovered something far worse than she ever imagined. And if that was true, her disappearance might not have been an accident at all. When detectives reopened Daniel Hartley's background, the quiet disappearance in Whitby suddenly looked very different. Until that moment, investigators had treated Charlotte Bennett's case like a possible accident. A woman walking near dangerous cliffs. Cold wind. Dark water below. But the discovery connected to forced them to reconsider everything. Because 3 years earlier, another woman had disappeared under strangely similar circumstances. Her name was Hannah Collins. She was 27. And just like Charlotte, she had been in a relationship with Daniel Hartley. At the time, police in Cornwall believed Hannah might have fallen into the sea while walking along the coastal path. Search teams spent days combing the cliffs and surrounding waters. But they never found her body. The case slowly faded into a cold file. Until detectives made the connection. 2 missing women. Both last seen near coastal cliffs. Both romantically involved with the same man. And in both cases, Daniel Hartley was the last person known to have seen them alive. When investigators began comparing the 2 cases, the similarities became unsettling. Hannah had also vanished after an evening argument. Neighbors in Cornwall had reported raised voices the night she disappeared. Daniel had told police then that Hannah went out for a walk to clear her head. Her phone was later found near the cliffs. The battery was dead. No recording. No clear evidence of what happened. And without a body, prosecutors had nothing. But Charlotte's case was different. Because this time, there was audio. 36 seconds investigators had now listened to hundreds of times. Footsteps. Wind. A man's voice too distorted to identify clearly. And Charlotte saying those 3 words. "You promised me." Detectives believed that phrase might reveal what happened. But to understand it, they needed to know what Charlotte had discovered in the weeks before she disappeared. Her laptop told part of the story. The searches about Daniel's past weren't random. Charlotte had spent nights reading old local news archives from Cornwall. She had saved screenshots, articles about Hannah Collins, missing person notices, public appeals for information. One document stood out. A forum post written by someone claiming to have known Hannah. The post suggested Hannah had been planning to leave her boyfriend shortly before she vanished. The boyfriend wasn't named in the post. But Charlotte had written a note beside the screenshot. Daniel. That simple question mark suggested Charlotte had begun connecting the same dots investigators were now seeing. But there was something else on her laptop. A document saved only 2 days before she disappeared. It looked like a draft message. Unfinished. Possibly something she had planned to send. The message read, "I know about Falmouth. I know about Hannah. If you're lying to me, I need the truth now." Investigators believed Charlotte had written those words for Daniel. Which meant the confrontation detectives suspected may not have been hypothetical. It may have already happened. But that raised another question. If Charlotte confronted Daniel about Hannah's disappearance, how had Daniel reacted? Detectives returned to him for another interview. This time, the tone was very different. When they mentioned Hannah Collins, Daniel's calm demeanor shifted. He became quiet, careful with his answers. He admitted he had been in a relationship with Hannah. But he repeated the same explanation he had given years earlier. She went for a walk. She never came back. A tragic accident. When investigators asked why he never told Charlotte about Hannah, he said something that raised suspicion. "I didn't think it mattered anymore." But to detectives, it mattered a great deal. Because now there was a pattern forming. 2 women. 2 coastal towns. 2 disappearances. And Daniel present both times. Still, suspicion wasn't enough to charge him. They needed evidence. That's when forensic analysts began examining Daniel's house in Whitby. The property was modest. A small 2-bedroom home on the edge of town. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. But digital investigators discovered something interesting. Daniel owned several external hard drives. One of them contained hundreds of photos. Most were harmless. Landscapes. Coastal scenery, harbors, cliffs. But a small folder hidden deep in the drive caught investigators' attention. Inside were dozens of photos of Charlotte, taken from a distance. Some appeared to have been taken without her knowledge. Images of her walking along the harbor, sitting at outdoor cafes, standing outside her cottage. The timestamps suggested many of the photos had been taken before they officially started dating. Which meant Daniel may have been watching her long before Charlotte realized it. To detectives, this discovery painted a darker picture of their relationship. What Charlotte believed was a chance meeting in a cafe may not have been chance at all. And then there was another discovery. Inside Daniel's wardrobe, officers found a shoebox containing old photographs from Cornwall. Several of them showed Daniel with Hannah Collins, smiling, walking along the cliffs near. But one photo disturbed investigators. It showed Hannah standing near the edge of a cliff path. The image was slightly blurred, taken from behind, almost like it had been captured secretly. And written on the back in black ink were two words: "Last Walk." Detectives couldn't prove when the writing had been added, or why. But the phrase felt chilling in hindsight, especially considering Hannah vanished soon after. Still, none of this was direct proof of murder, which meant the case remained frustratingly incomplete, until investigators returned to the most important piece of evidence: Charlotte's phone recording. For months, audio specialists enhanced the file, filtering wind noise, amplifying faint sounds, separating overlapping frequencies, and eventually, they uncovered something detectives hadn't noticed before. A second voice, faint, but clearer after processing. And this time, a few words could be understood. The male voice said, "You weren't supposed to find that." The timing suggested Charlotte had already confronted him, which made her reply even more chilling. "You promised me." Investigators believed she was referring to Daniel's explanation about Hannah. Perhaps he had told Charlotte the disappearance was an accident. Perhaps he had promised he was innocent. But once Charlotte discovered the truth about Falmouth, that promise may have collapsed. And the confrontation may have happened on that cliff path. But if that was the case, what happened next? That question remains unanswered. Because despite extensive searches along the coastline near, Charlotte's body was never found. The sea can hide many things. Strong currents, deep water, sharp rocks below the cliffs. If someone had fallen, recovery could be impossible. But detectives were no longer convinced it was an accident, especially after another small detail emerged. Charlotte's phone recording had captured something else at the very end. A sound investigators initially ignored. A dull metallic click. After weeks of analysis, experts believed the noise might have been a car door closing. Which raised another disturbing possibility. What if Charlotte hadn't fallen into the sea at all? What if someone had taken her somewhere else? Detectives searched Daniel's car again. But time had passed. Too much time. If evidence had ever been there, it was gone. Without a body, without witnesses, and without a confession, the case stalled once again. Years have now passed since Charlotte Bennett disappeared. Daniel Hartley was never charged with a crime. He eventually left Whitby, moved away, started a new life somewhere else in the country. But the files connected to both disappearances remain open. 2 women, 2 coastal towns, 2 cases still unsolved. Some investigators believe Charlotte uncovered the truth about Hannah's disappearance, and that discovery cost her life. Others think something more complicated happened that night. An argument, a struggle, an accident no one meant to happen. But the truth may still be hidden somewhere along those windswept cliffs. In the crashing waves below. Or inside memories someone refuses to reveal. Because even today, one question continues to haunt the investigation. If Charlotte confronted Daniel with the truth, what exactly had she discovered? And what really happened during those final 36 seconds? If this case intrigued you, let us know your theory in the comments. What do you think really happened that night? And if you enjoy real cold case mysteries like this one, make sure you subscribe for more stories that still leave investigators searching for answers.